So to cover all this and a lot more, we have with us Professor CB Bhattacharya. He's the Ed J. Zoffer Chair in Sustainability and Ethics at the Katz Graduate School of Business, University of Pittsburgh. He's an expert in business strategy and innovation aimed at increasing business and social value. And his research specifically focuses on how companies can use intangible assets, including corporate identity, reputation, CSR, sustainability, to sustain stakeholder relationships and drive market value. At this moment, I would also like to put in a word of thanks to our sponsors, IIFL and KPMG, without which this event wouldn't have been possible. Just give us a minute to get Professor CB Bhattacharya on screen. Till then, you can just watch this video.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a fairly long day for all of you, but we've kind of saved the best for the last. I have Professor CB Bhattacharya, who is going to talk about leading with purpose. This is something which has kind of come up repeatedly right from when in the different sessions when Uday spoke, in the discussions which Leo had with Falguni and Sanjeev, but again, very strongly when we had the session with Menaka Doshi in discussion with Suresh Narayanan, Kunal Behel, and with Ritesh Agarwal. So very clearly, it's the corporate culture, and it's the culture at the top which is determining how organizations will do. And CB is going to talk a little bit about him. There is, again, throughout, as you've noticed, we've not introduced people, but I just suffice it to say that, CB and I were in college together. So I've known him for a long, long time, which meant that I can get him out of bed at 6:15 in the morning to get up, comb his hair, and to speak to all of you. And with those words, I'm kind of going to hand the microphone over to him. He's going to make a short presentation, after which, depending if there is time, we'll have some questions. Otherwise, you can always send in your questions subsequently, and I will request him to respond to you. But with that, CV, thank you very much. Early start of the day, but so be it. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Amit, for your kind words, and thank you for the invitation to this wonderful event that you've put together. It is my great pleasure to speak to all of you from across the pond, as it were, where it is right now, early morning. And the topic that I want to discuss with you today about leading with purpose, because we are talking about startups, but startups don't remain startups forever. Sooner or later they will be full-grown businesses. And then how do you sustain yourself in this day and age? I want to start today by a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. As you know, January 18th is yesterday was, or day before, excuse me, was his birthday. And so time for reflection. And one of the quotes that really kind of resonates with me is that the time is always right to do what is right. And this, I thought, is really appropriate again for startups, companies that are conjuring visions and getting into the market, seeking valuations, this, that, because I often hear the refrain that, oh, okay, let's get the business off the ground first. We will think about purpose later. We will think about sustainability later. And this, to me, is really a damaging thought, a detrimental thought, because it's not right. Purpose, the all-important question of why do we do what we do, and what does business, what is a business all about? What societal benefit does it provide? This question has to be answered from the very, very beginning. This is not something that can be layered on from the top. It's not a garnish. It's a basic ingredient of the model that you're trying to build. So if any of us out there doesn't really believe that there is a difference between doing things right and doing the right thing, should now take a minute to reflect, a minute, an hour, a day, the rest of your lives, whatever, to reflect on this very, very important distinction that as humanity, we've learned to do things right, but we haven't necessarily learned about doing the right thing. And so let's take a step back and reflect on this idea for a second. And then let's see how business can actually kind of, integrate these concerns, that huge concerns that we are facing in the world today. And that's what I want to kind of actually talk to you about, that look at the world that we have created in terms of climate change, in terms of plastics in the ocean, in terms of water shortages and huge water footprints, in terms of inequality, which is, untenable or unthinkable even a few decades ago, the levels that we are seeing today. And then we have people who do not have access to electricity. How are we doing this meeting today on Zoom? I'm coming to you from the United States. Most of you are in India or in other parts of the world. And yet 20% of us do not have access to electricity in the world. People die out of indoor pollution. I come from India myself, so the idea of burning, charcoal and open fires indoors, 65 million girls across the world are out of school. I mean, think about that. I mean, again, most of us take education, for granted. We've studied in really good schools, etc. But it'll take till 2072 for the poorest girls in the global south to learn to read. I mean, not a very flattering statistic. And amidst all of this, we got hit with the coronavirus, which really put us back, in time, and gives us an opportunity to rethink and to build back better. I mean, these are phrases we've heard. The point to think about here is that all of these problems are essentially man-made or unaddressed by man. Clearly, climate change, plastics in the ocean, water, all of this inequality, and even depriving people of electricity and education and this and that. God did not come down and say, well, this is how the world has to be. Man created this, right? So human activity essentially is the result, has resulted in global warming. Human activity has resulted in the coronavirus. You can go and read on the origins, but it's all kind of attributed to man's ever increasing desire for consumption, consuming more and more and more. And that's got to give somewhere that has to manifest itself. And climate change is a perfect example of that, where we have actually no idea of the limits, the planetary boundaries, and we just keep on consuming. And no wonder that we are faced with, the situation that we are today. So business, as a result of all of this, and business's involvement in this, business today, as you perhaps realize, cannot operate in the business as usual mode of yesteryears anymore. And today, business has to transition from what I call the tragedy of the commons to the triple bottom line. The tragedy of the commons, which you see on the upper left-hand quadrant of my 2x2 here, is essentially the result of business trying to maximize profit at all costs. So without regard to externalities, without regard to kind of the pollution that it created, without regard to the human rights abuses, without regard to the healthcare of the workers, etc., and boosted its financial value. So business took value away from society, took value away from the environment, and boosted its financials. And that's upper left-hand quadrant is the tragedy of the commons, which by definition means that when everybody tries to maximize their private gain, that leads to a collective loss. When each of us try to maximize profit, that leads to this situation like global warming, right? That's the tragedy. That's a tragedy. Or the fact that we're running out of water, that's a tragedy. Why? Because nobody thought about the common good and everybody tried to maximize, kind of their share of the pie. So now we are realizing, well, this cannot carry on anymore. I mean, this is, it's gone on too far. The writing is on the wall. So whether by choice or kind of by force, by regulation, we are transitioning to the upper right-hand quadrant, where we're saying, well, you know what? If we invest in creating value for the environment, if we invest in creating value for society, we can also run a profitable business that way. And it's actually synergistic to create value for the environment and create value for society and boost our profits at the same time. And this interesting situation, or this upper right-hand quadrant, is something we want to refer to as the triple bottom line. And very simply, this is where sustainable business actually exists. This is the quadrant where business needs to be in if it wants to sustain itself, because without the planet, we are nothing. And without our people, we are nothing. I mean, profit is no good without the planet and people. So we have to learn how to coexist. We have to learn the ins and outs of this codependency. And there is some incredible synergies that happen. Larry Fink, who just brought out another letter, which I'll allude to later, wrote 3 years ago. Larry Fink of BlackRock, I'm sure most of you have heard of him. And he said that profits are in no way inconsistent with purpose. And purpose means, again, articulating that societal benefit, kind of integrating planet and people into your decision making. Profits are in no way inconsistent with purpose. In fact, profits and purpose are inextricably linked. Profits are essential if a company is to effectively serve all of its stakeholders over time. So this is the other mistake that we have made. The mistake that we have made historically is that we have only thought of shareholders as the key stakeholder. But shareholders are not the only stakeholders. Employees, customers, communities, all of them are important stakeholders as well. And, you know, it is only when we think through the lens of purpose that we can actually create value for all these stakeholders. And how do we do that is the purpose of this talk today. So sustainability, it is clear by now that sustainability, or the integration of planetary and societal concerns into our business model, is our license to operate. Most companies do not question that anymore, okay? They do not question why we need to be sustainable. But when it actually comes to implementing sustainability, that's where we see a huge difference across organizations in practice. So most organizations, I would contend today, are compliant, which is the bottom rung of this land pyramid that you see. They're compliant, they obey the law. You know, some others realize that investing in sustainability is a risk reduction mechanism, right? Okay, so if I'm a mining company, if I build stronger, you know, walls around my mines, or raise the level, you know, there's less chance of flooding. So it's a risk reduction mechanism. So, yet others, fewer, realize today that sustainability is an opportunity, right? So people want green products, people want green services. So let me give that to them through my business model, and I can make money. You know, that's a revenue generation mechanism, okay? And that's fine. But very few companies, excuse me, conduct business through the lens of sustainability. And what does it mean to conduct business through the lens of sustainability? It means that we consider the well-being of the planet and our people in every business decision that we make, from the mailroom to the boardroom. Every business decision that we make has to be made through that lens of sustainability. What impact, if I throw paper, instead of throwing it into the recycling bin, if I throw it into the trash in the mailroom, what impact does that have on the planet? Think about it, you know. Or if I neglect sustainability in the boardroom and do not allocate any resources to it, what impact does that have on the planet? What impact does that have on society? If I pay my workers, you know, a really, really poor wage in a bid to maximize my profits, what impact does that have on my on society? So these are questions that we have to think about. And again, this goes back to the idea of the fact that business exists in society, not the other way around. Business exists to serve society. It is the duty of business to provide a societal benefit. The job of business is not to make money. So this distinction is something we are still struggling with and not getting our arms wrapped around. And I believe it is high time, if we go back to Martin Luther King and think about doing the right thing instead of doing things right, then we will realize that it is doing the right thing to integrate environmental concerns and social concerns into every business decision. So my question is, how do we get there? And if profits and purpose coexist, what's the big deal? Why should we not think about the environment? Why should we not think about society when we are engaging in business? Well, there is, of course, a roadblock, and which is kind of prevents us from behaving sustainably. And the roadblock is that sustainability is viewed as someone else's problem in most companies. I have done a lot of executive education with lots of folks from different big companies, small companies, nonprofits, for-profits, governments. Everybody views sustainability as someone else's problem. Oh, I've got more important things to do. I've got to make money. I've got to meet my targets, yada, yada, yada. We have a sustainability department. They can take care of the environment. They can take care of societal issues. Doesn't really work that way, unfortunately. And this is something that we have to learn to fix. And this was the issue that I started thinking about, kind of, okay, how can we make sustainability everybody's job? And I realized that, well, for that, I have to see some best practice. I mean, okay, and sure enough, as I started doing my research, I found that there are some companies where sustainability is actually everyone's problem, right? So to talk about one traditional company, Unilever makes this, brand of tea called PG Tips. In the UK, it's sold in many countries in the world. So in one factory in the UK, a worker came up with this idea that you could snip 3 millimeters off of kind of one of the sleeves of the tea bag, 3 millimeters of paper. And you might think 3 millimeters is like, hardly the eye can even see that much. But when you multiply 3 millimeters by the scale, by the number of tea bags that Unilever produces, then it amounts to saving quite a bit of paper. And believe you me, it also involves saving money. When you save paper, you save money and you add to your bottom line. So this idea came from the shop floor, came from the worker, and it was actually implemented in practice to obviously, the company's benefit and society's benefit. And I started thinking about, so what is going on? I mean, what do these companies have, or what have they created that we can actually take and use as knowledge for all of us who are still thinking of sustainability as something that's very, very compartmentalized. And in doing this, this was my book that I published about 2 years ago. So I visited, lots and lots of companies, spoke to CEOs, employees on the shop floor, middle managers, all over the world. And I realized, and the result of this research is this book called Small Actions, Big Difference. The idea of small actions, big difference being that we can do, our part, each of us can do our part, but the resultant will be a big, big, big impact. And so rather than thinking that, oh, I cannot solve the problems of the world, let me start by thinking, what is it that I can do in my own sphere? And if all of us think that way, big things can happen. So this book is actually available in India. There is an Indian edition at a very, very, at a much, much more decent price than the US version. So if you're interested, please do look it up, wherever books are sold. But the telling quote, from the book, it's like the chief marketing officer at Unilever, who's since retired, and who was also the chief sustainability officer of the company, basically said that, make sustainability everyone's job. Everyone's job. If you have one exception in the company, then everybody thinks that they're the exception, and then the whole thing falls apart. And that's what it takes to conduct business through that lens of sustainability. If each of us know in an organization, whether that organization has 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, doesn't matter, 100,000 people, doesn't matter. But if each one of us know that it is our job to think and act on the environment and to think and act on society in whatever this business decision that I'm making, there is no question that that company is going to be sustainable in the long run. And so how do we get there? How do we build this sense of ownership of sustainability? Sustainability ownership is this concept that I proffer in the book. And would you know that there is a literature actually on psychological ownership that turns out that human beings like to not only own things like buildings and cars and so on, but they also have feelings of ownership towards appealing objects such as people, companies. You can have feelings of ownership over a company where I work. We can also have feelings of ownership over an idea such as sustainability. So it does not have to be legal ownership. can be just psychological ownership. And that is part of the human condition, So to paraphrase Jean-Paul Sartre, he said something to the effect of, we are what we have. Ownership is part of the human condition. We enjoy owning things. We take pride. We have pride of possession. And that sense, ownership is an extension of the self. So, so we like to talk to others about the things that we own and that we are actually proud about. And this to me seemed like a very powerful idea to implement in the context of sustainability, because ownership fulfills some basic human drives, like the drive for efficacy. Each of us wants to feel competent. Each of us wants to feel that, we can do something about this environment that we are in. And sustainability offers us that opportunity to do that, exactly, because however low down in the organization we might be, kind of you're working on the shop floor, or we are working in an open office, each of us has the opportunity to do something, whether it be putting off lights, whether it be printing two-sided, whether it be recycling paper, and as the higher up we go, the opportunities get larger and larger. And each of us also has the opportunity to think about how we can make the company better, more sustainable, like the person at Unilever who thought about the 3 millimeters of paper. Similarly, sustainability gives us the opportunity to define ourselves and express our identities. You've heard of the Great Resignation, people quitting in large numbers. And why? Because there is no meaning in our jobs anymore. We come in to make some money to put food on the table. That's not what it was about. It was about kind of, expressing ourselves. It's about finding meaning in our life, and our job is one of the big spheres of finding meaning. And sustainability, again, or engaging in sustainability, working in a purposeful company, allows us the opportunity to express our identity at work, feel proud of ourselves. And the sense of belonging that, hey, I'm part of the solution. I'm doing something for my children. I'm not kind of just going into work and ignoring this existential threat that's out there, or several existential threats today that are out there. So sustainability is a very, very good candidate to essentially kind of, create this sense of ownership in people and get to work, hands rolled up, no questions asked. So taking these ideas, I created a model, a framework, if you will, which I want to kind of give you just the elements of. And if you find it interesting, do take a look at the book. And I call that the sustainability ownership model. And it essentially has 3 phases. It has an incubation phase. I'm sure startups love the word incubate. But here as well, we have to incubate, the problem, our sustainability plan. And then we launch the plan in the organization, and finally we entrench or make it routine, kind of, so that we don't have to think twice about acting sustainably. Now, I will take you through these phases, but suffice it to say that the first step is the most important step. And the first step of defining the company's purpose is something we cannot avoid. If we try to take a shortcut here, we will not succeed. And that goes back to the title of my talk, is like leading with purpose. What is purpose? Again, let's revisit this question. Purpose is not mission. It's not what we do. It's not who do we want to be. It's not vision, but it is our raison d'etre. It is why do we do what we do? Why do we do what we do? And if you say, I'm doing this to make money, you're truly living in the past. Truly living in the past. Only by creating value for all stakeholders can you create money. And if you do well, if you lead a purpose-driven business, believe me, you will be more profitable than others. I mean, this has been shown through research, my research, other people's research, BlackRock's research. Everybody, like Larry Fink said, profits and purpose are inextricably linked. So we've got to define ourselves, define what our business does. What is the societal benefit? And Enel is a very, very large electric utility operating out of Italy. And I spoke to their CEO asking about, again, questions on purpose. And this gentleman said, you know, I was a middle manager in the Middle Eastern desert long time back when I got a sense of what is the purpose of an electricity company. And he said, I was standing there and we were building a power plant, and I could see these trucks coming down the hill with fuel to power the plant. And there were also these transmission lines going out of the plant, but there was no load to feed. You know, I didn't know what the purpose of that plant was. So then he started asking questions, kind of, okay, what are we doing here? Why is there a power plant in the middle of the desert? And he found out that the idea was that they would be building air-conditioned tents in the middle of the desert so that the nomads of the area could take a break and come to these tents, air-conditioned tents, and sit down and watch TV. And he said, when I heard that, it just didn't make any sense to me, because our job is not to foist new habits on people. It's rather to help people do what they need to do, what they want to do. Think about the fact that 20% of the world still doesn't have electricity, and you're trying to provide electricity and air conditioning to someone who actually has not even asked for it. This is where business goes wrong, you know, kind of foisting new habits on people who don't ask for them rather than solving problems. So ask for yourself, what is the societal benefit my business provides? And you've got to inspire epiphanies, you know, go to the front line, see how people live on the front line, go to the ocean side or wherever change is happening and see how life is getting disrupted for those living close to water. You know, so these epiphanies become very important for articulating your purpose. And very importantly, then you have to define what's material for your business. Everybody cannot solve all the problems of the world, right? So there are some people can run after CO2 if that's important. Some others might run after water if that's important. But some others might run after financial inclusion. If you're like financial services, you know, you might run after financial literacy, because I've got to educate people on why they need to save. So you've got to do what's called a materiality analysis across the entire value chain to figure out what are the top 2 or 3 issues, sustainability related issues, that you got to deal with. And that comes directly from your purpose. That comes directly from the kind of business you are dealing with. And once you've defined your purpose, and once you've defined your materiality, what are your top 2 or 3 material goals, then you can cascade all of this to the organization. That takes us to the launch phase, when we empower our stakeholders to act sustainably. And how do we do that? Well, first we have to entice them, or appeal to them, say, hey, this is a good thing. This is a good ship to jump aboard, you know. Why? Well, you know, if you don't do this, what are our children going to do? That's an appeal to the heart. Look at what's happening to the world. It's an appeal to the heart. Or, hey, if you do this, that's going to save you money. It's an appeal to the head. You know, for those who might not be caring about the planet as much, but who's caring about the bottom line, there are plenty of people like that around us. But hey, it's going to save you money. And then the person kind of, you know, gives his or her attention to you. It's a story I heard from Apple, talking to the environmental director. He said, you know, the most fun part of our business is to actually go and talk to the managers and say, if you can reduce this material, use of this material, not only is it going to help the planet, but it's also going to help your bottom line. And the ears perk up. So, wow. So you've got to figure out what strategies work for which people and kind of, you know, entice them to come aboard the sustainability journey. But it's not enough to kind of, you know, create that willingness. You also have to create ability, because everything is not as easy as kind of putting off lights and printing two-sided. You've got to train people in things like eco-efficiency analysis, you know, complex R&D or whatever, disposal systems, you know, and you've got to install management systems so that work becomes easy. If it is difficult to act sustainably, nobody's going to do it. It's got to be at the push of a button. And that's why it's easier for a startup than anyone else to bake sustainability into the business model. It's much harder for a company like Unilever or IBM or Siemens to actually act sustainably, because they've got to retrofit this entire organization. Whereas for a startup, You bake it in, from day one. No excuses, no exceptions. So that you lower the costs of acting sustainably and you increase the benefits. How do you increase the benefits? Well, you can pay people better if you see that they're acting more sustainably. You can promote them. There are all kinds of ways that we don't have time to discuss right now. But the idea is that you've got to alter that cost-benefit balance. And you've got to make it everybody's job, right? From procurement to disposal. No exceptions. And this is where I will submit that sustainability is not the same as CSR. CSR can be departmentalized. It can belong to one part of the company. Sustainability cannot, okay? And the final step is, how do we routinize? How do we routinize? How do we entrench so that we don't have to think about this all the time? Kind of, comes naturally. So putting off the tap when we brush our teeth should come naturally to us by now. So similarly, all the tougher things of sustainability also should come naturally. Now, how do we make it a habit, right? How did you get your child to wash his or her hands without being told anymore? We had to struggle on it at some point, but now not anymore. So you've got to communicate progress. Hey, you've done so great. Look, we have reduced CO2 by 20% in our company. Everybody should know that when they turn on their laptop. Gives them pride, like, hey, we're doing something. But to co-create solutions, ask people, hey, what can we do to be more sustainable? You will be amazed at how many ideas they give you, And finally, celebrate your successes. Celebrate successes. So Marks and Spencer, which you see the Plan A, their sustainability program, they have Oscar-style red carpet parties where they call out store employees for going the extra mile on sustainability. That's watched by the entire organization, right? Companies even celebrate failures, right? So with the idea that if you don't fail, you're not trying hard enough. So these help you make them routinized. And finally, you can collaborate with others. Sustainability has to be put in a pre-competitive space. So you're not competing on sustainability, because the tragedy of the commons problems cannot be solved just by one company alone. And we are seeing some amazing collaborations taking place. The vaccine would not have happened had there not been some amazing collaborations. So we've got to keep that in mind, and we've got to kind of open up and start even talking to our competitors and build collaborative platforms to take care of business. Now, how does this ownership play out in action? The way it plays out is wonderful, because it's like happening far away, but I don't really have to think about every damn thing. So ownership in action, someone from a very big retail company told me this. He said some of the great leaps and breakthroughs with sustainability have happened because people across the organization have been inspired to change things themselves. They don't have to come to me for the details because they know they're part of the business. That's ownership in action. And then the other example is like an employee who decides that he can make changes to a valve that will save energy or save water. It could be mindless, or you could think this is minutia in the beginning, but add all those up, the executive said, you get a very big difference. That's the essence of small actions, big difference. Small actions, big difference. Do what you can in your sphere of influence. There's lots of work that I've done following up on the book to actually show that purpose-driven companies, are more sustainable. There is no doubt about that. I've shown that through several studies. I'd be happy to chat more for those who are interested. And this will actually follows through to profits. They're also more profitable. But purpose-driven companies are also more profitable. And I'll end with Larry Fink's one quote from his letter in 2022, which just came out, I believe, yesterday or day before. And he says that the next 1,000 unicorns won't be search engines or social media companies. They'll be sustainable, scalable innovators, startups that help the world decarbonize and make the energy transition affordable for all consumers, right? So the idea is that the next 1,000 unicorns are actually going to be in the business of sustainability, right? They're going to work on energy transition. They're going to work on water. They're going to work on waste. They're going to work on human rights. They're going to work on some fascinating problems. And so we better get ready for this change. and we better kind of think purposefully from the beginning, right? What can you guys do? I mean, there's just bake purpose into your business. I cannot say that often enough. Build environmentally and socially and economically sound solutions. Believe me, it's going to boost your branding. It's going to lead to stronger stakeholder relationships. Fund your next business priority by leveraging financial tools like green bonds. There's so much money going around in the world today for companies that want to do something in the field of sustainability. Take advantage of it, you know. Assess where in your value chain green solutions could help. There are 1,000 things you can do. So this is an apology for a slide. It's just a starting point, nothing that, you know, the list can go on and on. Just one thought before I sign off, and, you know, we don't inherit the earth from our parents. We borrow it from our children. And I realized this myself. I have an 18-year-old son, and I realized this through him, when I look at the eyes world through his eyes, I realized that we've really screwed it up, you know, for the future. And in the remaining time that we have, you know, let's not kind of, you know, live in the past. Let's actually try to make a difference so that we can leave them something that they can, you know, inherit and they can sustain for their children in turn. So many other people have written about this. I have a center that I run where we talk about these issues ongoingly. If anybody has any interest in this, you know, do let me know. Happy to chat. And otherwise, kind of do connect on LinkedIn, Twitter, email, whatever suits the bill. And thank you so much for your time and attention. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you very much, CB. The presentation explains why CB is a part of a select group of individuals who have been included in Business Week's outstanding faculty list. You know, my own sense is that just like the Indian market now pays a premium to well-governed companies, we are not far from a period when they will start to pay much, much more in terms of valuations for companies which are led by purpose. So, you know, you did speak about values, but that is what is going to create value. And that's a lesson which is very, very clear. It's very, very obvious. And, you know, we're kind of really run out of time. There are a couple of questions from the audience, but let me kind of ask you one final question before I let you go. Or one question before I let you go, and which is that, you know, who owns this? Is it the board? Is it the CEO? Is it the leadership team? Or, you know, is it owned by all the employees? Because, you know, you did touch upon ownership. If you can elaborate that, because if I own something, I'm more likely to do and stay with it than if I were to say that it's being thrust upon me.
Great question, Amit. Great question. It truly belongs to, initially, it does belong to the CEO and the leadership team. So without the CEO, it's going to be very, very difficult to, you know, implement the purpose, to drive the purpose and drive the sustainability agenda in the organization, because the CEO is the one who can communicate with the board, because you need the resources as well from the board. The board has to sanction that. And at the same time, the CEO, along with his leadership team, can reach into the organization. The CEO has to lead by example. So Paul Polman would be one example of an individual who I interviewed, and he said, I would not, you know, be here with any ounce of credibility if I didn't live by my actions, and if people did not actually see me doing what I talk about. And the CEO has that ability along with the leadership team, and I'm talking about a CEO being a transformational CEO, not a transactional CEO. There are different kinds of CEOs, but You have to kind of motivate your workforce, and then the organization owns it. Over time, the organization owns it. Then it kind of, it's really kind of entrenched or embedded into the organization, becomes part of the DNA. But the initial impetus has to come from the CEO. It can come from employees, but it has to be channeled through the CEO so that, the resources are in place, the enthusiasm is in place, and the whole organization is aligned to deliver kind of on that promise, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you very much. With that, I think we should bring our whole event to a close. It's been a fantastic few hours. We began with Uday speaking about his own journey as an entrepreneur. We often forget the fact that he is an entrepreneur, and you go back 30, 35, 40 years, he was a startup, pretty much like a lot of the companies are. So it's been a fantastic journey. His, the path which he took, the roadblocks which he faced, he was kind of very open and very transparent about it, as well as what are the lessons for today. This was followed by a session with Sanjeev Bikhchandani and Falguni. Both of them, in a sense, are, Sanjeev began his journey in this space about 20, 25 years ago, and is a veteran, as is Falguni, because she kind of paradropped into this space, having kind of got experience as a banker, and therefore her mindset was completely different from that which you see in a lot of startups. And both of them are, to a large extent, role models for a lot of the newer companies. And Leo spoke about them, the fact that startups are seen as disruptors, and how do you kind of fit in the image of an anti-hero to that of what they are supposed to do. This was followed by a very good session in terms of how the mindset of companies change once they are private to public. And Pramad from you did speak about the fact that they always saw themselves as a public company, and always kind of took decisions saying that, look, assume we are a public company, we are under scrutiny, and what we need to do. And this was kind of pretty much some of the what is expected, how do investors think about it, was echoed by Promeet Ghosh and by Akash Prakash, as well as the lawyer in the panel. After that, there was a great discussion on disclosures, what needs to be said. Maybe there is something like too much disclosures. And what was interesting was the fact that companies have flexibility before and after an IPO, but that short window when there is an IPO, they kind of get boxed in by doing a lot. So I'd like to thank Sai for moderating it, and the panelists out there. We had a I keep saying that once you have all these companies, they would be, we spoke about the numbers right at the beginning. Some of them are going to be extremely wealthy. How should they think about it in terms of family office, philanthropy? What are the causes they should get involved in? How do you kind of identify what you want to do, and how is this landscape changing? And it was interesting to hear about the fact that just like companies talk about technology and the digital transformation, you are kind of talking about digital transformation and disruption in something like philanthropy. So that was a fantastic discussion and a lot of messages to take home. And then finally, of course, very fortunate to have CB coming and speaking to us. One of the themes which I kind of felt, or one of the threads which ran throughout the discussions, was leading with purpose. You cannot run a business if you don't have values. You cannot hope to succeed if you're not clear what the business purpose is. You cannot attract the right talent to work in the company if you're not able to have a broader agenda rather than just profits. And CB kind of brought across this very clearly. But not only did he tell us why it's important, but he actually also very quickly gave us a framework in terms of how companies can think about this. So with that, I'd kind of like to draw the proceedings to an end. I'd like to thank all the panelists and the moderators and the speakers for making it a fantastic day and for sharing their ideas and thoughts. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I'd just like to say that over the next few days, we will be kind of putting up the videos, etc., on our website. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors who kind of helped out, which is KPMG and IIFL, who came in, and there have been others who've kind of worked with us throughout the year, though they weren't associated with this event. Edelweiss and IDFC Bank come to mind, as well as the stock exchanges, NSE and BSE. So I'd like to thank all of them who've been with us, and let me once more thank all of you as audience and participants who've made it worthwhile for us. And we know that you're there listening, paying attention, taking down details so that you can hold and you can ensure that companies and your businesses do the right thing. Thank you very much.